88 of Surah Taha, which is the 20th chapter of the Quran. As normal, we'll begin by reciting the passage, and then inshallah we'll open the conversation, open the floor. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فأخرج لهم عجلا جسدا له خوار فقالوا هذا إلهكم وإله موسى فنسي أفلا يرون ألا يرجع إليهم قولا ولا يملك لهم ضرا ولا نفعا ولقد قال لهم هارون من قبل يا قوم إنما فتنتم به وإن ربكم الرحمن فاتبعوني وأطيعوا أمري قالوا لن نبرح عليه عاكفين حتى يرجع إلينا موسى قال يا هارون ما منعك إذ رأيتهم ضلوا ألا تتبعني أفعصيت أمري قال يا ابن أم لا تأخذ بلحيتي ولا برأسي إني خشيت أن تقول فرقت بين بني إسرائيل ولم ترقب قولي قال فما خطبك يا سامري قال بصرت بما لم يبصروا به فقبضت قبضة من أثر الرسول فنبذتها وكذلك سولت لي نفسي قال فاذهب فإن لك في الحياة أن تقول لا مساس وإن لك موعدا لن تخلفه وانظر إلى إلهك الذي ظلت عليه عاكفا لنحرقنه ثم لننسفنه في اليم نسفا إنما إلهكم الله الذي لا إله إلا هو وسع كل شيء علما كذلك نقص عليك من أنباء ما قد سبق وقد آتيناك من لدنا ذكرا صدق الله العظيم. So this passage is a continuation of the previous passage that we've covered 2 weeks ago, which is just to give some context. After Musa alayhi salam has saved Banu Israel with the miracle, through the miracle, them passing through the Red Sea, they immediately after he left them and went into this sort of solitude so that he can talk to Allah, they returned to, they actually worshipped what is known in the Quran as the calf or the golden calf that was made, that a family made them. So the first verse that we have says, فأخرج لهم عجلا جسدا له خوار فقالوا هذا إلهكم وإله موسى فنسي. So he said he brought them an image. He made an image of a golden calf that had a deep voice, and he said, "This is your Lord, as it's also the Lord of Moses." And then the verse says, فَنَسِيَ أَفَلَا يَرَوْنَ أَلَّا يَرْجِعُ إِلَيْهِمْ قَوْلًا وَلَا يَمْلِكُ لَهُمْ ضَرًّا وَلَا نَفْعًا. How could they forget that this calf can't come back to them with any harm, neither harm nor benefit? وَلَقَدْ قَالَ لَهُمْ هَارُونُ مِنْ قَبْلِ يَا قَوْمِ إِنَّمَا فُتِنْتُمْ بِهِ. And in fact, Aaron or Harun, he did not remain silent. He told them, you have only been tested with this calf. Mainly because the key thing is that it used to produce a voice, and this voice was mainly there because of the wind. when you have something that is hollow from the inside and then the wind comes in, it makes, and we talked about this in the last class. We're talking about very simple people in terms of the mindset. So you could easily be deceived. وَإِنَّ رَبَّكُمُ الرَّحْمَنُ فَاتَّبِعُونِي وَأَطِيعُوا أَمْرِي. And he said, your Lord is the Lord of mercy, so follow me and obey what I say. قالوا لن نبرح عليه عاكفين حتى يرجع إلينا موسى. They said, we will never stop worshipping this calf until Musa comes back to us. In the previous discussion, we discussed how committed they were to Musa in the first place. We discussed the three worlds that we mentioned: عالم الأفكار, عالم الأشخاص, وعالم الأشياء. The world of things, the world of ideas, and the world of individuals. So they were still in the world of individuals. They are committed in the first place to one individual, that was Musa alayhi salam. They have not known the essence of Judaism yet. So they are not committed to the idea of Judaism, but they are committed to Musa. They have, and it's a nascent community as well. It's literally it's a beginning. So there is much to learn. So one can understand the context. So they said, we will never stop worshipping this calf until Musa comes back to us. When Musa came back, he said, Ya Harun, ma mana'aka idh ra'aytahum ضلوا? What stopped you from when you've seen them deviating? What stopped you from following me, from coming after me? أَفَعَصَيْتَ أَمْرِي? Did you disobey what I say? قال يا ابن أم لا تأخذ بلحيتي ولا برأسي. Said, oh my mother's son. Even though they were both, we said that last week, they were four brothers, and yet he's just reminding him that they both came from the same womb. Said, let go of my head and of my hand. إني خشيت أن تقول فرقت بين بني إسرائيل ولم ترقب قولي. I was afraid that you might say when you come back, you do not really listen to what I say in terms of preserving the unity of the community. قال فما خطبك يا سامري. Musa turned to Samiri, the cause of this whole division, the cause of this whole fitna. He says, what's wrong with you? قال بصرت بما لم يبصروا به. He said, I have seen something that they hadn't seen. I've learned something that they haven't learned. فقبضت قبضة من أثر الرسول. And I've taken, this is a very, tricky sentence. It could mean I've learned some of the teachings of Musa. So, these people, they haven't completely forsaken God. They have not completely departed ways with Musa or parted ways with Musa. So, what the Samiri did, he basically mixed things up. He mixed Musa's teachings with false things. That's why many of them followed him. Otherwise, if he's completely saying, we're leaving what Musa has done, we're leaving what Musa is teaching, probably nobody would have listened to that. So, فَقَبَضْتُ قَبْضَةً مِنْ أَثَرِ الرَّسُولِ could actually mean I've taken some of the teachings of Musa and I mixed this with what I know. And we mentioned last week that he was a man of knowledge as well. فَنَبَذْتُهَا, and I just used this. The capacities and the skills that I have, I used them. وَكَذَلِكَ سَوَّلَتْ لِي نَفْسِي. This is the way in which, my own self has prompted me. قال فاذهب فإن لك في الحياة أن تقول لا مساس. Musa said to the Samiri, get away from here. Your punishment in this world is that you will live alone. You are very dangerous to any community. You can't live with communities. You are a source of deception. La misas means you live on your own. You don't mix with people. You are a source of danger to people. وَإِنَّ لَكَ مَوْعِدًا لَنْ تُخْلَفَ. But on the day of judgment, there is something that awaits you that's even more dangerous, that is more torturous. وَانْظُرْ إِلَى إِلَهِكَ الَّذِي ظَلْتَ عَلَيْهِ عَاكِفًا. And look at, the boat that you've made up, that you've created, and you've been worshipping it. لَنُحَرِّقَنَّهُ. We will burn it, we will destroy it, and we'll throw it away in the sea. إنما إلهكم الله الذي لا إله إلا هو وسع كل شيء علما. Your true Lord is the one and only God. He has full knowledge of everything. كذلك نقص عليك من أنباء ما قد سبق. This is the way in which we narrate or we relate to you the stories of the past. وقد آتيناك من لدنا ذكرا. And we've given you from our side the reminder that is the Quran. As normal, you have 1 minute to reflect, and the key question as we used to do. Pick one word, pick one sentence, pick one verse if you wish that really captured your attention. Again, as I always say, getting you guys to speak is not an easy task. I realize. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a sophisticated idea or something, just one word that captured your attention. It should not be a made-up thing, it has to be a real thing. It's good with Taha.
لنحرقنه ثم ينسفنه.
Verse 94 قال يا ابن أم.
It's what
In verse 96 فقبضت قبضة من أنثر الرسول.
The verse later on in the book, I think.
فإن لك في الحياة أن تقول لا مساس.
لا مساس يعني؟
Yeah, it's idea.
خشيت أن تقول فرقت بنا.
I don't know.
It's fine.
So just pick one.
Yes, I mean, nothing. Something that captures the attention, that's the whole point. But so, feel free to share whatever you want to share. You will have to justify the numbers.
So I need one word.
Yeah.
بصرته.
بصرته.
أن لا تتبعني.
أن لا تتبعني.
إنما فتنتم به وإن ربكم الرحمن. It is like the scarf that has to be below the Lord.
Next one.
No.
What?
No,
Okay. From my side, probably here. خشيت أن تقول غلط. Any other choices? Okay. Let's begin with Ayman. What is with Al-Qadr?
I think Prophet Moses he was teaching his people how to deal with the false god that's been created by tradition or by social understanding, and he chooses a very somewhat radical approach, and that is to
Who chose?
Moses, and that is to completely eradicate it and from existence. And this is very symbolic to every false idol that comes up in every context. So I understand Moses did not gradually somewhat engage with his people, but rather chose somewhat radical, of course, with the positive connotation, not negative, completely eradicated by God and not give it any time.
Interesting. And you picked this up from Al-Qadr.
Yes. Yes.
We'll destroy this. Interesting. I do take your point. I do see where you're coming from, in the sense that Musa alayhi salam comes across in this passage as being quite forceful and assertive, and probably the hero of this passage of the story is obviously Harun alayhi salam. We'll get to discuss in a bit why there are people and interpreters who treat him in different ways. But I do take your point. So you're saying that Musa alayhi salam could have been more gradual.
I think so, yes. I think maybe there's a way of maybe explaining how the calf is, maybe through conversation that the calf does not do something.
So you're saying he's not engaged with it, he's not trying to understand nothing.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It is a false idol, therefore coming at any time to go.
That's a really good point. I do see where you're coming from. But you see, that's last week we talked about the three worlds: Alam al-Afkar, the world of ideas, the world of individuals or leaders, and the world of things. We said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blamed. Were you here last class? Okay. When we were trying to understand and engage with the verse, where Allah was blaming Musa for coming ahead of his people. And Musa said, they are just nearby, and I'm here for you, or because of you. And we said that the logical context to this, or the logical understanding of why Allah is blaming Musa is mainly because these people have not moved yet from the world of leaders, or the world of persons, to the world of ideas. So they are not connected to Judaism in the first place, they are connected to Musa alayhi salam. Because the moment Musa leaves them is the moment they go back to their old ways. So at this very point, people need, they haven't moved yet. Musa is acting as the center of this whole thing, and he is literally getting them out of this. So their connection is deeply to Musa alayhi salam in the first place, and I'm not trying to justify the saying, this is the context. Musa alayhi salam is aware that they are deeply tied to him in the first place. So seeing him destroying this would be like a wake-up call to them, as opposed to him explaining to them, Musa. Otherwise, Harun tried this track of rationalizing things. Can't you see that it doesn't bring you any benefit in a heart? Nothing, right? So the difference here, we've seen Harun acting in this way didn't work with them, but Musa had an authority. Harun did not enjoy. Even though Harun comes across as being more rational in this context and more wiser, but Musa alayhi salam has the sense of authority that Harun doesn't have. Maybe that's the context. But I do see your point.
Yeah. So when I first read of this verse, I told myself, why did Harun do this? Why didn't he stand up really for Moses' people and say something? But then when I look back and I remember when Prophet Musa asked Allah to bring in Harun with him, saying that he was much wiser and a better speaker than him, and it all makes sense now. That he knew his limit, so he started because it says وَلَقَدْ قَالَ لَهُمْ هَارُونَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. So he spoke to them before, but then he balances. He knew when to stop basically and say, okay, I'm just gonna wait for Musa to sort this out. So it takes a lot of wisdom.
Absolutely.
Understand your limits.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. You cannot read this passage without the whole context of the surah. The surah, seems to prepare us for Harun's mission somehow. At some point, you will see how important Harun is to this whole thing, and we've seen this being a wise advisor to Musa alayhi salam. In this very context, you needed someone like Harun who would act in this calm and this wise manner. But equally, the people of Banu Israel at this very stage, they also equally needed Musa, as in they needed someone to take them out of a specific world into another world. Allah chooses people, for their own tasks. Everyone is destined for something. Well, I do see your point.
I think they struck the perfect balance.
Absolutely.
Musa and Harun.
Absolutely. Mustafa, you had
the 96th verse. I think Samary's response to Musa's questioning on why he made the calf, I think it was interesting that this belief, his justification is based on perhaps Musa's teachings from before. It's a different dynamic to other idolaters mentioned in the Quran, like the Quraysh or the people of Prophet Ibrahim's time. I think whether it's based on these people weren't very knowledgeable, they were mistaking the sounds from the calf as being some sort of divine sounds or something like that, or even after when they first believe, and then soon after Musa leaves, they construct this calf and they disbelieve. It's an interesting dynamic. I think it just struck out to me because it's whether that's based off of lack of knowledge or lack of education from these people, they start to
from the community side.
Yes, from the community side, they believe these supposed signs, and they justify it with what they know from perhaps Musa's teachings. I think it's interesting in stark contrast to other proper idolaters.
Absolutely. There is the concept of half-truths. When you come to delude people or to deceive people, it's not, you won't come up with something that is completely false. You won't believe it, but you will believe what is something that's truth that is mixed with falsehood. It's a very dangerous thing. And that's exactly what he did. They always say, youth is the age of half-truths as well. Because you haven't fulfilled maturity in its full sense, but at the very same time you're halfway through. So you think you know, but you don't fully know. That's why you make so many wrong decisions. not completely wrong decisions, like they are half informed, so to speak, half right and half wrong. And that's why again Harun stands out in this passage. Yeah, the idea of mixing, the Quran says, well, actually, it's Surah Al-Baqarah at the very beginning. وَلَا تَلْبِسُوا الْحَقَّ بِالْبَاطِلِ. Don't mix truth with falsehood as a major thing. Definitely. Thank you. Yeah.
It's later on. Mainly just because I saw it as an example of the Quran's use of logical reasoning. It uses reason to explain something, I guess, why the idol isn't worthy of worship. It can't reply to you, it can't benefit you, it can't harm you. And something that's used throughout the Quran, and the sense of use of logic and reasoning, actually inviting people to use them.
Absolutely. Quran's usage of logical reasoning, a subject that's very deep in my heart. I'm working on something to do with this actually, the philosophy of the Quran, and I do spend some. I have like 2 chapters on this very concept. The strategies the Quran uses to advance its own arguments, and one of which is the deduction, basically. How do I deduce arguments from? Depends on which method that you follow. But yes, absolutely.
Yeah, this idea of the sort of the dialogue Sayyidina Musa has with this person in a time of anger, I guess you can say as well. But it's like, I'm just comparing it to sort of another sort of dialogue Sayyidina Ibrahim with his dad, where his dad is also an idol maker, and probably not doing the best sort of overall. But his sort of approach of like forgiveness and saying, I'll pray to God for him to forgive you, and sort of I'll leave you, but like in peace, sort of thing. Here it's sort of like Sayyidina Musa saying to this person, you'll leave by yourself, isolated from everyone, sort of exiled kind of thing, and there's no sort of hope for you kind of thing at all. And kind of maybe links back to something we spoke about a few weeks ago about always trying to wish kind of the best for everyone. Even like, I don't know, we use the example, yeah, but it's sort of wishing the best for everyone. Whoever it can be can sort of find guidance kind of thing in the end. Even we used the extreme example maybe before around, but this idea of someone can find another path in their life. Even this person maybe would say the most dialogue, but in a time of anger maybe you can say maybe isn't the best sort of dialogue. I'm not sure what about that.
So you mean getting him exiled was not?
Just generally the sort of the sort of maybe the dialogue and the way he's addressing it is different to maybe how other prophets would address it.
Thank you so much. That's a really bold insight, and I appreciate that. But I think we should always take the context into account. What is the bigger context, the wider context? It's a people that are linked to an individual. Imagine if Musa is doing his work, doing all this, and you have someone like Musa, like Samiri. The moment Musa leaves them for a bit, he absolutely washes the mind. So he somehow undermines whatever Moses built. So he's so dangerous to a community that will grab nature. That's why Musa was advised to stay with them at this very moment, because they need him. Maybe in later stages they wouldn't need. Musa did much of the hard work, even though he did not get into Jerusalem with him. But the foundations of the community were placed with Musa alayhi salam. So at this very stage, I would not trust someone like Samri to stay with Musa alayhi salam, with Moses' people. And at the very same time, you just sit, you're on your own, don't mix with them. A very dangerous person. So within this context, I find this a fair conversation and actually a fair decision, mainly because of the context. And I don't think Musa alayhi salam was not being rational, was being, yes, he comes across as being angry, definitely, but actually he's looking for justification. He's not just throwing judgments here and there. He's actually listening to Harun, and he listened to Asari, and he had what evidence they both had. which is what a leader would do, the sense of accountability. So that's another very important principle. Musa is being accountable. He's holding them accountable. That's number one. Number two, he has given them a chance to justify. He heard Harun. Harun said, I didn't do this with an evil intent. I did this for a good cause. Right? So Harun had a good justification, but Samuel did not have a good justification. Actually, we see, okay, whether Harun's plan ended up being a good plan or not, how would you assess his work? Intention. So Ahmad is saying that Harun's intent was good. Okay, how about Musa? How about Samari? What is his problem? His problem is one of
Evil.
Evil
intention.
Evil intention. Listen. Okay, when you come to fix a problem, that's a dangerous way of solving a problem. By the way, the vast majority of crimes, crises, and problems are caused by someone who come and say, I meant wrong. So everything. That's a good intention. Should we then assess things not by the intent but by the result? No, we should not, because the results are not ours. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a mediation between the intent and the result. That is وأن ليس للإنسان إلا ما سعى. So you can't rely only on the intent, and you can't rely only on the result, because Allah, the results are not me, are not mine. I do my best with a good intention, so I've tried as much as possible to have a good intention. I've taken the efforts, the results, tawfiq min Allah. There are people in this very life that will assist you by your results. It's a very wrong thing, a very human thing as well that we always do. We assess, you see someone, you assess them, the money they have, the degrees they do, whatever. You have someone maybe who studied for 4 years at uni, and they have done much work, but for some reason they fell sick during the exam period, and then instead of getting a first, they got a third, whatever. What would you say in that case? In the eyes of the vast majority of people, they would always say, you didn't do your job, you're not really a good student. Of course, if this is a pattern, there's definitely a problem. But if you know someone that they have been doing a really good job, or something out of the hands had happened, what would you say in this case? That's why Allah does not take us by the results. He takes us by our intent and effort. Intent only is a very lazy way of saying things, of doing things. Everyone can claim, the most evil of people would claim a good intention. Really. The Quran speaks of this. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. When they are told, do good on earth, people say, no, we're just trying to reform things, we're trying to fix things. And says, أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ مُفْسِدُونَ. They are actually the wrongdoers, but they don't really feel it, they don't really know it. So there's a midway, halfway through between the judge the people by the results or by the intent is to go by the efforts. In this case, Harun alayhi salam did not say, I left them to do whatever they wanted to do, and I just kept silent, doing nothing until you came back. But I had a good intention. My intention was to stay silent so that they remain united. No, he didn't do that. He tried to prove to Musa that my intent was followed with efforts. وَلَقَدْ قَالَ لَهُمْ هَارُونُ مِنْ قَبْلُ. And and he said, إني خشيت يا قوم أنما فتنتم به. He did not remain silent, but he was not confrontational. He was not confrontational. That's the most important thing. What was the point?
Different judgments between.
Yeah, exactly. So Musa alayhi salam was not being irrational or something. He had both. He actually asked Samiri for a justification of what he did. And the justification actually is worse than the act itself.
Sorry, just one thing. Strange thing is, I thought his attitude towards Harun was more fierce than his attitude towards Samri.
That's true. That's true. Mainly because he deputized him, so he was expecting him to just do the job. But yes, sometimes we act so assertively because I know someone so deeply. It's that type of connection. When you know someone, you have that deep connection, you become even more assertive, even more aggressive. You understand at times because of the nature of your connection. You don't tolerate. If Samiri has no relation to Musa in the way that Harun would have, what we call in Arabic al-asham, like as in the expectation. I expect you to do a better job. He doesn't have this expectation from Samiri, but he did have it from Harun. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Sorry, Islam, did you want to say something?
I was going to make a comment on when you're saying that Musa alayhi salam was not irrational.
He was not irrational.
Because in Surah Al-A'raf, it says that he threw down the tablets, but then in verse 145 in Surah Al-A'raf, Allah says, "Hold on to these with firmness."
That's true.
So then, isn't that irrational?
And I mean in this context, in his reaction to Harun, his reaction to Samiri, that's completely understandable. I mean, the other surah has a different context. That's true. These actions have their own context. What I mean with this sentence is just his reaction to Samiri. Was it fair? Was it wise? To me, it was wise. He did give him a hearing. He did hear his defense. He did not come and say without listening to him, even though Harun said to him, Samiri misguided him. He did not say, okay, I'm taking your word for it. I'm not giving him a listen. I'm not giving him a hearing. He did not do that. He brought him. He listened to him. He didn't find his defense worthwhile. Yeah.
What struck me about this is, I think, something that we've slightly touched upon. First, I find that the context of the situation is saying that things are more complicated than they look like in the first instance. I think you touched upon it when you talked about half-truths. It's the whole kind of situation and so on and so forth is just speaking to the fact that if it was so clear, everyone would have known. But the idea of mixing some right and some wrong and so on and so forth, that we almost have to understand that normally in our life we don't choose between absolute right and absolute wrong. Normally it's between the best of two evils.
Absolutely.
And so this context, this basis, is what kind of made more clear to me what Harun did, which to someone coming from outside, being Musa, he undermined pillar number one, and it's Tawheed. And you undermine that, which I think a lot of us would imagine is something that we would undermine everything else for, except that. But then Harun had to pick between the best, the better of two evils. He did his best with one of them. He realized that if he was to confront them and so on and so forth, he would lose them, and then when Musa would come back, the general good would be less. And so in that moment, the courage in Harun, not the fear, I think, the courage in Harun to be able to undermine something that would bring him so much talk for a wise goal, to me was just striking. And it speaks to yeah, that's it.
Absolutely. That's beautifully hard. Things when it comes to public stuff, especially leadership, these are not simple things. You're not faced with simple choices, either this right or this clearly wrong, this clearly right. In leadership there is this concept of false dichotomies. The people, anyone who works in public positions, they would really know this for a fact, how difficult it is to be in a position where you really have to make a choice when you are faced with two false dichotomies. As in, okay, what is I'm trying to think of a good example to explain what a false dichotomy is. Okay, think of ad-din wa dunya. That's a false dichotomy. Either you work for this world or you work for the hereafter. Really, is that what Allah asks for? That's definitely a false dichotomy. It doesn't have to be this case, but you think it is, right? But that's why Muslims, they really can't come to terms with concepts like secularism. We've been fighting this for centuries. Why? Because we don't look at it from this perspective. To us, it's all one, right? There's a really interesting book that just came out with Oxford University Press. It's called The Islamic Secular. The Islamic Secular, by a renowned American professor. His name is Sheikh Jackson. Sheikh Jackson is a really established academic who translated Al-Ghazali's Faisal al-Tafriqa bayn al-Islam wa al-Taha. It's a very important book. So he talks about why do Muslims have been why do Muslims struggle with concepts like secularism? Mainly because internally they have conversations, externally they have conversations, and there are so many problems, mainly because of this false dichotomy, either this or that. So in this case, this is a complicated reality. And in this case, the dichotomy is, the false dichotomy is, or the choices. Harun had the first choice. That is basically, he could do some sort of irreversible division. Imagine Harun coming, and the first thing he does, he destroys this image, this calf. What would happen? To them, this is Moses' law. That could end up with bloodshed, right? And this could be happening at the account of Tawheed. He thinks, I'm defending Tawheed, which is, as Hafiz said, the most important, the most central concept. You can't compromise this. The other thing, this would cause a lasting division. You can't really fix that. The other choice, that he could do some sort of temporary tolerance. That temporary tolerance, he knows that Musa will come back and he will fix things. And he sees some good hope in those people. That's the key factor here. If these people were absolutely established in the faith, I don't think Harun would have done that. Harun has done this because he sees some good in those people. And he sees how Sami mixed the truth with falsehood. So the dichotomy here is that, yes, Harun was trying to really pick the lesser evil. So he tried to, what is the lesser evil here? It's just you tolerate something that is not, you temporarily tolerate this, but you keep them united until Musa comes back. But you haven't caught the greater harm is simply them having this sort of lasting division, bloodshed. And if you may consider this from a maqasidi perspective, to preserve people's blood, people's lives, is a higher objective in Islam. So keeping the context of those people in mind is a very important one. So to Harun alayhi salam, he just avoided an irreversible division. If he intervened, if he was confrontational, he did remind them, listen, okay, perhaps when someone who is more authoritative than me can come, he would sort things out. But at least for the time being, I can try and keep them united. That's wisdom. That is wisdom. Wisdom, that's the thing. The Quran speaks of two things. Al-Kitab wal Hikmah. Al-Kitab is the Quran, is the text. Al-Hikmah is the context. You may have a lot of Muslims who know the text, but how many of them use the text in the right context? That is Al-Hikmah. So that is Harun alayhi salam. Using the right text in the right context. And that's what you need from a leader. How did you know?
When you said that he sees good in them, it somehow comes across to me in when they said حتى يرجع إلينا موسى.
Interesting. Absolutely.
Absolutely temporary.
That's not a very important one. They're not rejecting Musa. They're not rejecting his faith. They are saying until he comes back and tells us, because Samuel told us this is Moses' law. That's how simple they were, by the way. That is how simple. What is helping us now make sense of all this is the typology that we've talked about. The world of individuals, the world of ideas, the world of things. Without this typology, you can't really make sense of this. Why did Harun compromise? Why Musa was being blamed for coming ahead of his people? Because you're not meant to lead people at this stage. You're not mature enough. They are very simple in terms of mindset. They can easily be deceived. Be with them until they become mature. When they became mature, even it was after he died, they did not get into Jerusalem until after Musa died. That means he left them with some good faith. So that's a very useful tool that helps us navigate the Quran. Yes. Yeah.
Just something I think I shared with you before, but it really almost illustrates this is a quotation I saw somewhere, and it's that absolute conviction is the luxury of someone standing on the sidelines.
Absolutely.
He should have preserved Tawheed.
Yeah,
you're on the sidelines.
That's so true. That is so true. Absolute conviction is
the luxury of people on the sideline.
On the fence.
Fence or sideline. They're not in the middle of the fight. They can see that he's balancing.
It's very clear to them.
Yes.
Yeah. And I like what you said. You might think that Harun was not courageous in this context. Actually, this is the moral courage. That is the true moral courage. That you don't really go with the expected view. In this context, if Harun could have come out, at least in Moses' eyes, as a hero. And maybe for later generations, they would see him as a hero as well. He defended, as one single individual, he defended Tawheed in the midst of all this. Right? But he chose an unpopular view, unpopular position, by way of maintaining this innocent, nascent community that needed support. That is real and true leadership. Was it? What did you say something?
Yeah, I mean, I said a word.
Yeah.
Masoko? Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts, nothing to do with the word. I'm not sure if I'm analysing things correctly, you can tell me like if I am or not. But to do with, for example, I'll keep it brief. So to do with like them waiting for Musa to come back before changing their opinion, it almost makes me think like, who are they doing it for? Who are they worshipping the calf for? Who are they doing anything for? And I see it, again, I could be analysing this wrong, but I see it almost as a reflection of the human nature on how if you're doing something for the wrong reason or for the wrong person, once that reason disappears, you'll go into something else, if that makes sense. So say someone, for example, only drinks water because their mom tells them to. The second their mom goes out the house, they start drinking juice, right? So that's one like reflection on human nature that I'm sort of seeing. I'm not sure.
Is this a positive thing or a negative thing?
It's just.
Do you mean they're not really?
I'm not sure.
They're not really decisive. They're not being decisive or committed or something.
Yeah. So like, are they doing it for Musa? Like, say they were.
You weren't here in the last class, were you?
No.
Okay, that explains.
Yeah.
We were talking about, you know, in the maturation of communities, they pass through stages. At a certain stage, people would be very committed and very linked to their leaders, and that's why we must have prophets. Prophets are very authoritative, mainly because they embody what they preach, right? So at a very specific stage, you know, young faith communities would go by their prophets. When they mature, they go by the books of their prophets. So in this very case, yes, they were doing it for the sake of Allah. I mean, Musa alayhi salam was really training and raising them in this way, but they weren't mature enough to be left alone. That's why in the previous passage, Allah somehow, you know, gently blames Musa, asking him, why did you leave them behind you? You could have stayed with them, they need you. So this is what prophets do. They help us mature. So that we move from the world of people, being connected to certain people, to being connected to ideas, to being connected to principles. In this case, the principle is Tawheed, and the idea is the oneness of God. To be based on God. They haven't reached that level yet. They needed someone who embodies those ideas, but that person was absent. That's why they ended up with this.
And that's one of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam wasn't the nation like completely lost? And then he came and stayed over a period of I think it was 23 years revealed the Quran, and then he actually stayed, and for that reason they stayed guided even after that.
Yeah. Even after that, I would tell that. I mean, yes, we started to dwindle right after that.
Yeah.
But at least we've had some really good leaders that alhamdulillah helped maintain this unity for a bit. Umar, Abu Bakr, and these are big names. Ali, Uthman, these are big names definitely. Inshallah, as we said before, we must have disclosed what happened with Muslim history. How did you want to?
On the point when you mentioned Rasul, I thought that was going to come to it, but maybe we can also see the famous quotation of Abu Bakr through those events as well. The next step, not from things to individuals, but from individuals to ideas, when he says that whoever was worshipping Mohammed has to move on.
Absolutely. It was a very tricky moment for the Muslim community. Maybe I'm trying to delay this discussion mainly because that's an important question. As in, okay, I'd rather keep it for a separate discussion. That's a tough one. Because it should give us a good way to assess that history. Why did they quickly? No, we'll put that delay. Was it Kaysan or Islam? Did you want to?
I could say something, but I think isn't on the board, Sheikh.
Can we then delay it after they done?
I
Okay,
agree.
sir. Please.
I read this in context as in like what kept you back from following me out as in like this question. I thought it was a bit. You have much time.
We have like 10 minutes or so. Are you taking 10 minutes?
No, not too much time. I was saying I'm trying quick sound. But I just thought it was a bit vague because I didn't know if you meant. I know the word like following is not supposed to be taken like so literally. So I wasn't sure if this sort of following was in terms of the leadership, is in terms of the command that Moses sort of gave, and that he should uphold this, or if the following should be in terms of how Moses went and sort of isolate himself, and how when Aaron noticed that the people were going astray, why he stayed with them and why he didn't isolate himself as well with the people.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I mean,
Oh, I was going to say also perhaps this could justify Aaron's argument as in the division that this may create. So if he didn't leave, that this may also create further division. Maybe that's
that's a very, very good point. The translation, I mean, I translated it as what stopped you from coming after me when they deviated. You could also translate it as what stopped you from rebuking them or from reminding them. So in terms of following me in that regard, walking on my footsteps, that could definitely be a possibility. Absolutely. And Harun, there is probably no benefit in Harun leaving them at this stage, no matter what.
Yeah, so I was thinking perhaps.
Yeah, I think I'd rather go for this translation. Yeah, I think that's both are possible translations though. Yeah. Yeah, Taha. Nothing. I think we had. Was it Ani?
I just thought about what Aaron would say when he came back to see this, and he says this is a test. So he says clearly why this is happening to them, and then he highlights God's mercy, and that's like he's the most merciful. And I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. Why? What would someone respond with? And they think why would they respond with that?
Sorry, could you say that again,
As
please?
in, like, the response to something like this, I thought was important why he highlighted God's mercy and highlighting that this is a test, like to explain to them clearly this is a test.
Are you asking or are you commenting?
I'm commenting, this is
Okay.
why
I see.
it takes my thought was interesting.
I see. He's as if asking there is still hope if you
Yeah.
repent. Yeah, absolutely.
Even for like something like
Sure,
where it breaks
sure.
Tawheed.
Definitely. Is this like my own point? I think I've already touched upon this. خشيت أن تقول فرقت بين بني إسرائيل. You know, there is something in Islamic studies that is known as fiqh al-awlawiyat. Fiqh al-awlawiyat, the fiqh of priorities, which is hugely lost amongst Muslims. Hugely lost. What to prioritize? Sometimes you have two good choices, but they're not equal in terms of their importance. Something that is essential. You know, in maqasid, which is another, to do with this as well, we have a very important discipline in Islamic studies called maqasid, or the objectives. When you come to study those maqasid, they have some sort of a scale. This scale would have three levels to it. There is the first level called al-daruriyat, al-hajiyat, al-tahsiniyat. You know, when you have this sort of scale, when you come to prioritize, you have to really understand the nature and the way you everything that you are trying to prioritize. Al-daruriyat means the most essential things. Al-hajiyat means the things that are the complementary things. They're not as essential, but they are not, inessential. They are still complementary. And then at-tahsiniyat, which means the supplementary things. They are not as important as the complementaries. So you have three levels. Daruriyat, the most important things, 100% important. Al-hajiyat, 90 or 80% important. At-tahsiniyat, 30, 40%. Think of daruriyat. People must have doctors, medical doctors. You can't, people will get sick by definition. You need to have doctors, right? Do you need to have hospitals? Hospitals, which one is more important? The doctor or the hospital? The doctor is more important. But for a doctor to function properly, you don't need to have a hospital. So you need to work to reach this. Okay. Do we need to have the most up-to-date and the cutting-edge, devices in this hospital? These are the tahsiniyat, embellishments, or the areas where you need to really supplement this, so that you can have good doctors. Apply this across the board. When I come to prioritize and to gauge what to do, I need to really know the way to everything. Is it part of al-tahsiniyat, or al-hajiyat, or al-daruriyat? I'm being reminded of a situation, a very famous example in the Sunnah, where a group of companions were traveling in a trip, right? One of them had a wet dream. They wake up in the morning, he had the wash, to have the bath, so that he becomes pure. He asks his companions, what do I do in this case? They said, لا نرى لك إلا أن تغتسل. You have to really have a bath. And it was so cold. It was so cold. The man died. He had the bath, he listened to them. They thought because he had a janaba, he just needed to wash, no matter what. They came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said, such and such had happened. The Prophet's response was, قَتَلُوهُ قَتَلَهُمُ اللَّهُ. They killed them. May Allah kill them. أَلَا سَأَلُوا إِذْ لَمْ يَعْلَمُوا. If only they asked the people of knowledge. إِنَّمَا شِفَاءُ الْعِيِّ السُّؤَالِ. The treatment of ignorance is seeking knowledge, you ask. Right? Compare this to, I'm trying to remember exactly what the hadith was, but it's to do with Mu'adh ibn Sufyan. I think he is the one. He once, again, went with a group of companions, the same scenario. He had a wet dream, and actually he didn't have a bath, nothing, he led the prayer. They came back to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Rasulullah, I've done this, it was so cold, I couldn't have a bath. And the Prophet approvingly smiled. And he said, Amamtahum wa anta junub. Like, did you leave them when you didn't have that bath? And that was being said with a smile. I mean, the Prophet approved of it. Compare this to his reaction to the people that he said they killed him. Right? So where is if they, you are undermining someone's health, that means they won't exist after that. They won't pray. So there will be nobody to pray. So that scale of priority is very important. How can I start teaching us this? Imagine if he just left it, or if he caused, he intervened aggressively or assertively, and he said he was very confrontational. Bloodshed would happen, division would happen, because you would still have people who would come and defend themselves. We thought, we were worshipping our Lord, that is Moses' Lord. The division that would have happened would have been inevitable, right? So, in terms of that scale, Harun did a great job. He worked on the level of the daruriyat, and he did not really just cope with it. He said he reminded them, this is on the right track, wait until Musa comes back. So that track of the daruriyat, al-hajiyat, al-tahsiniyat is very, very important. Keep it in mind. use it as well. It's very, very significant. And by the way, one of the false dichotomies, I'm really pleased that I remember this. That's a better example of false dichotomies. Harun alayhi salam was not, struggling with the question of either unity or truth. That's a false dichotomy. A false dichotomy is about two positive things. Two positive things, and you are asked to choose one of those. So you might get the feeling that Harun chose unity over the truth. Is this the case? This is not the case. What is the case then? Because in reality, literally there is unity without truth is false. Unity without truth is literally falsehood. And the Quran often says, ما كان الله, that's one of the Quran's objectives. ما كان الله يذر المؤمنين على ما أنتم عليه حتى يميز الخبيث من الطيب. Allah will not leave you united until He gets you to see who is the good one and who is the bad one. That's the Quranic objective, to really refine people. Literally. So, it's unity without truth is not truth, is false. But also truth without unity would be quite fragile. Imagine if Harun just leaves them. But again, remember, the key context is that there is good in those people. They are not rejected. They are just being deceived. And Harun is actually trying to really keep those good people together so that this goodness, this collective goodness, could be used for a better cause. That is wisdom. And he could see that, they are not being polytheists. They are not worshipping other gods. They are thinking this is our Lord, this is Moses' Lord, to their mind. So all they need is a correction. To just have a false conception, or then just a correction. To them, they haven't turned back. They haven't turned their backs to Musa alayhi salam. So that scale of maqasid, or riyad, or hajjat, or tasigat is very important because it saves us those false dichotomies. And I gave the example of Amr ibn al-As. Sorry, it was not Muawiyah, it was Amr ibn al-As, yes. It saves us those false dichotomies. And it gives us some sort of clarity as what to do with those who have those moments of contradictions. So keep those in mind, go by them, they truly and really help. That's if we would leave with those thoughts, either the one that Taha said, the false dichotomies, the intent, the result, the effort thing is very important as well. We see as well, that's maybe we'll end with this, time is. Islam, did you want to say something? Very quickly, please.
Yeah, I wanted to understand the difference between the action of throwing between Musa and the people and Samari. Like Musa is like al-qiha, and then Samari was yeah, and then the people were something. So it's like different words for. I was trying to understand why. That's all. What does that mean?
Can we begin with this next class? That's something to do with the nature of the language, and it's a very extensive discussion. It can take us ages. You had a thought from the last class, which was an amazing thought. When we had this conversation about biology being applied chemistry being applied physics being applied mathematics being applied philosophy, and philosophy is, we said, it's a byproduct of misunderstanding of language. And someone maybe توصيف or either توصيف or كسان. توصيف said, could language go back to biology because we are born as creatures? That's biology comes back to the discussion. Then Islam said, I'd actually take language to be more central. And then he quoted the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. The first thing that Adam was told was the language. So language is literally at the beginning. Beautiful thought, a very central one that gets you on the right track. Thank you for that. So you always ask the good questions. Thank you.
At the end.
At the end, so keep the other one for next week, inshallah. One thing before I forget. We've seen a sense of accountability from Musa's side. When he came back, he wanted to hold everyone accountable. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? But he did not only do that. He was willing to listen. He gave them hearing. He asked Harun to defend himself. He asked Hassan to defend himself. From Allah's side, we see a sense of validation to Harun's work, by the way. The Quran was silent on Harun's attitude. The Quran's silence is often taken as a sense of approval. Yeah. Musa came back, he told Harun off. Harun explained himself, and then Musa moved to As-Samiri. The Quran said nothing in between. That is the silence of the Quran. How do we interpret this silence? This silence is in and of itself an approval. Why? Because the Quran would never remain silent on the wrong thing. The Quran could have said, Harun was right. But the Quran doesn't have to say that. If Harun was wrong, the Quran would have needed to say he was wrong. But because he was right, the Quran doesn't have to comment. Do you see the logic of it? That's a whole different area. Ibn Rushd talks about this. The silences of the Quran. When the Quran makes silence on something, sukutul nasr. When the text is silent on something, what does that mean? And then he talks about this is وَبُلِيَ النَّاسُ مِنْ أُنَاسٍ يَسْتَبْطِقُونَ النَّصَّ حَيْثُ هُوَ سَاكِتٌ. And they make the text speak when it is silent. Yeah. So that's a very important point. Inshallah, we stop with this and we meet up next week. Is it Eid? Oh, so it's about a week after. Sorry about that. My effort. So the week after we continue the conversation. But thank you so much. Some amazing ideas.